Hello friends, welcome to Star Explainer. Tales of Herding Gods Part 323 and 324 explains based on novel. So let's start explanation. Dragon rearing sovereign looked at a half-god walking over from the distance. That half-god should also be a god, as its body was already half-faded. He should be a strong practitioner that was following ancestral Dragon King, and he had been killing the others who had boarded the ship. However, this person was afraid of village chief and waited until village chief had vanished before appearing. My lord, this person's abilities are extraordinary. Dragon rearing sovereign jumped down from the hall and said solemnly, I shall fight to my death. I hope my lord can revive me in the future. Dragon sovereign, don't worry. You are my celestial river dragon king. I won't let you die here. Qin Mu also jumped down from the palace hall and said, you will fade into the void in the next reset, and it will be the same for that half-god as well. You just need to drag the fight out until the next reset. Dragon rearing sovereign faced that half-god and chuckled. But I don't have the confidence. The bloodline of the dragon race in his body is higher than mine, so I can only fight him with the intention of dying together with him. The more I try to drag for time, the more likely it is that I will simply be killed by him. He roared and smacked his fist against his palm in front of his chest. His chi and blood flared up as he chuckled. Victory belongs to the strong. Back then, I was also a god that fought against human Emperor Su and didn't die under his sword. Following my lord, I became Celestial River Dragon King, and not a puny god that is raising dragons for high heavens. If you want to take my lord's life, it will be over my dead body. He fought with that half-god, and both of them transformed into two huge dragons to roll and fight. They controlled fire and water with their divine arts and had terrifying power. Qin Mu walked into the palace hall. Loud explosions rang out from the fight between the two divine dragons, and even though not many people that had boarded the ship with them were left, there were still some that had survived. He didn't manage to see Luo Wushuang's spirit elite guards, and he didn't manage to see that Prince Qiu Ming from the celestial heavens. Those people must have hidden, and since their cultivation wasn't at the god realm yet, they wouldn't fade into void yet. They could wait until the gods finished killing one another, or after they faded into the void. Qin Mu examined the palace hall. It was Wei Suifeng's palace hall. Founding Master Wei Suifeng of the Heavenly Saint cult had explored the ruins of End and experienced a peculiar time travel incident, which brought him back to the Dragon Han era. He had become the left commander of the Dragon Han Celestial Heavens Feathered Forest Guards, managing the most powerful army of gods. This big senior brother also had some understanding of Celestial Venerable Ling's divine art. When he was returning to the celestial heavens with the Feathered Forest Guards, he realized he should be returning to his time, when he encountered the fog again, so he extinguished his lamp to return. Wei Suifeng was very clever, and it was very likely that he had figured out what was lacking in Celestial Venerable Ling's divine art, allowing him to escape unscathed. Maybe I can find some clues at Big Senior Brother's place. Qin Mu examined the layout of the palace hall, and he memorized the exact location of every item before he started to search in detail. He found Founding Master's bookshelf, and on the shelf were books that were written in different languages. Some were written in the immemorial god language, some were written in the ancient god and ancient devil languages, and some were written in the human language. Qin Mu browsed through them and placed them back messily. He found the personal letters that Big Senior Brother had written using the human language. The letters recorded some trifling matters Big Senior Brother had in the Dragon Han Celestial Heavens. Qin Mu read through in detail, but there wasn't much useful information. However, there was a geographic map that led to the ruins of End. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. This map to the ruins of End complemented one of the geographic maps Big Senior Brother had left for him. Even though there was a slight difference to the terrain, the rest was more or less similar. One of the places Big Senior Brother wished for me to find is the ruins of End. He must have left something in the ruins of End as well, something that is definitely extremely important. Qin Mu composed himself. From the looks of it, the geographic maps that Wei Suifeng had left for him contained huge secrets and treasures. The first thing he had found was the commander's seal of the Feathered Forest Guards. The second geographic map had led him to God Kai Shi and the God Execution mysterious knife, but this wasn't the main point. The main point was that the result was him pulling strings to get Qin Mu to meet with the remaining survivors of Crimson Light era, allowing eternal peace to form an alliance with Crimson Light Son of God. The third geographic map had led Qin Mu to find the head of God Yingjiao in Supreme Brightness Heaven, receiving the complete blueprints of the Parameter Arc. Meanwhile, this geographic map was the fourth map that he knew the name of. Wei Suifeng had returned to the Dragon Han Celestial Heavens when he was exploring the ruins of End. He must have discovered something there and hid the secret there, waiting for Saint Woodcutter, or Qin Mu to discover it. The ghost ship gave off a gentle tremor. This was the prior indication that the ghost ship was about to reset again. Qin Mu's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly left the palace hall. He used a stone to press down on the personal letters, before raising his brush to doodle on the pillar where Celestial Venerable Ling had left her poem. Once he did that, he hurriedly retreated. Outside the hall, Dragon Rearing Sovereign was still battling that divine dragon, and the blood of dragons was splattered around. Both of them were completely into the fight, and even if the ship was going to reset, they couldn't stop themselves anymore. Light burst forth as the ghost ship left this time and space. When the light faded, Qin Mu regained his vision and saw that the personal letters he had pressed down with the stone had vanished without a trace. Qin Mu's eyes lit up, and he returned into the palace hall. He saw that the things he had placed messily earlier had returned to their original locations. Everything was neat and tidy. Qin Mu turned to walk out of the palace hall. He examined the pillar in front of the hall, and saw that his doodle had vanished. However, Celestial Venerable Ling's words were still there. Qin Mu smiled and suddenly laughed loudly. A distance away, Dragon Rearing Sovereign's opponent had vanished, and this big dragon was also completely exhausted. He was covered in injuries, and his body was also about to fade away as well. He gasped for breath and asked, "What is my lord laughing about?" "I changed the location of some items, and after the reset, the items returned to their original positions." Qin Mu looked at the poem on the pillar with interest and said with a smile, "I even doodled on Celestial Venerable Ling's poem, and where I doodled has vanished. However, Celestial Venerable Ling's poem still remains. Do you know what this means?" Dragon Rearing Sovereign was at a loss. "We are situated in Celestial Venerable Ling's divine art, and we can't change anything on the ship. Anything that is destroyed will return back to its original state once the ship resets. However, Celestial Venerable Ling boarded the ship afterward and changed something on the ship. She left behind a poem on the pillar." Qin Mu asked, "Why was she able to leave her poem behind?" Dragon Rearing Sovereign was even more at a loss. He shook his head and said, "My lord, my brain is dumb. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been seized by you to become Celestial River Dragon King. The substance on the ship doesn't change, doesn't move, doesn't increase, and doesn't decrease, yet Celestial Venerable Ling could still leave behind a poem. This means that she solved her own divine art." Qin Mu said with a smile, "In her poem, she described the reason behind her divine art, and when writing her poem, she used the method to solve the divine art. This also means that she hid the solution to the substance not changing, not moving, not increasing, and not decreasing in her poem." Dragon Rearing Sovereign, Dragon Rearing Sovereign. Dragon Rearing Sovereign's body became fainter and fainter. When he turned back to look, the Dragon King slowly faded away like an illusion. My lord, you will have to rely on yourself for the rest of the journey. Dragon rearing sovereign completely vanished. Qin Mu stood there in a daze and only came back to his senses after a while. There was no one left beside him, only he and his shadow were left. You guys are still beside me, right? I know village chief and you are both here, you haven't gone far. He sat down and looked at the poem on the pillar. He muttered to himself softly, don't worry, I will find a solution. Celestial Venerable Ling thinks that time doesn't exist in this world, that it's just a hallucination from the change in substance. If a substance doesn't change, move, increase, or decrease, time doesn't exist. This is the basis of her divine art. When she was executing this divine art, she didn't perfect it and left behind a flaw. When she returned to this place, she left words on this pillar and increased the substance. In the distance, divine weapons were placed on the racks in the ghost ship's armory. Even after so many thousands of years, these divine weapons still looked brand new. The armory was very wide, and there were corpses on the ground. A knife that was currently dripping blood hung in the armory, the droplets of blood pitter-pattering down from the tip. The person who held the knife had a very steady grip. The owner of the knife was also like the corpses on the floor, it was also a one-armed youth. Junior brother Zhe Huali, teacher Luo has already faded into the void, and there are fewer and fewer people on the ship. We, the Spirit Elite Guards, are the most outstanding disciples chosen by the descendants of the gods in the celestial heavens. Only by going through strict elimination rounds can we enter the Spirit Elite Guards. That one-armed youth looked at Zhe Huali on the other side of the weapon rack, and said indifferently, hundreds to thousands of people have to die in every selection in order to choose an outstanding disciple of the Spirit Elite Guards and receive the true teachings of Teacher Luo. Most of the people choose to sever one arm, as only then can we comprehend the path from Teacher Luo's knife skills. However, Teacher was biased and felt that you had the best aptitude, so he sent you to the lower bound to learn from Fu Riluo, hoping that you would walk down another path. The demon knife behind Zhe Huali's back trembled, and he said solemnly, Big senior brother, you are the best at learning Teacher Luo's knife skills to the point that even I'm inferior to you. However, you are inferior to me in the knife Dao. You are only following behind Teacher Luo. Why did you have to kill so many junior brothers and junior sisters? They could have faded into the void, and they posed no threat to you. They had to die because they were weaker than me. I would fade into the void earlier than them. That one-armed youth said coldly, I need to ensure that I'm the last one alive. To enter the knife Dao, I could even sever my own arm, much less kill them. As for junior brother, I want to see what Teacher Luo saw in you. I want to see how you are better than me and how much further you can walk ahead of me. This is why I've left you for last. ZHNNG. Knife light shone, and in an instant, the entire army was filled with knife light. The two youths collided, and the terrifying power activated all of the divine weapons in the armory. The power of the divine weapons burst forth, and blew the whole hall into pieces. After the terrifying divine might swept past in all direction, Zhe Huali raised his hand and sheathed his two knives behind his back. He walked out of the ruins and didn't bother looking at the corpse of the one-armed youth. Every step of his seemed to be perfectly measured, and the distance never changed. My knife skills have been through Overlord Body Qin's beatings, and have long surpassed Teacher Luo. Not even Teacher Luo knows it, so you wouldn't either. I entered the Dao with my knife and comprehended two heavens of the knife Dao. This is my own Dao, my own skills, while you are using Teacher Luo's knife skills, Teacher Luo's knife Dao. This is why you are dead. He walked towards the camp. When he looked at Qin Mu sitting in front of the palace hall from a distance, his pupils constricted. Qin Mu seemed to sense his gaze and turned around to look at him with a smile. Zhe Huali couldn't help revealing a smile, and he felt apprehensive in the next moment. This rascal is using his smile to lower my guard. I can't fall for his trap. He is an enemy I have to get rid of. At that very moment, another figure appeared in the distance, and it was Prince Qiuming. Only 3 of us are left from the same batch. Prince Qiuming shook the sword in his hand, and droplets of blood splattered out. I killed several batches of people that boarded the ship later, and discovered a secret I want to tell both of you. He smiled and said, it turns out that the unchanging constants on the ship can also die. I just killed one. Killed one of the unchanging constants. Zhe Huali's pupils constricted, and the demon knife behind him suddenly opened its eye to stare at Prince Qiuming. The tiny human in the lantern told them about the secret of the unchanging constants, which stirred up internal strife between the people on the ship. Zhe Huali had also originally suspected that the unchanging constants could be killed. He just didn't expect Prince Qiuming to actually intercept and kill the other people that had boarded the ship, even killing one of the unchanging constants. Prince Qiuming said leisurely, I wanted to see if killing the other unchanging constants would have any effect on us. Maybe one more of us could survive. However, I realized that I've already reached the boundary of starting to fade. In the last reset, a portion of my power vanished. I'm afraid I can't test out this theory before I fade into the void. Zhe Huali's heart sank. He still hadn't felt himself starting to fade, which meant that the ghost ship felt that Prince Qiuming's strength was above his. That was why Prince Qiuming was weakened by the ghost ship. I don't dare sever my own cultivation, because I'm afraid I would die at the hands of others. Therefore, I placed all other matters aside and came to find both of you. Prince Qiuming said with a smile, the reason I came down to the lower bound is to get rid of Overlord Body Qin, and the rest of the reformers, to eradicate the threat, when it is still budding. Zhe Huali, you belong to the spirit elite guards of the celestial heavens, and I'm a prince of the celestial heavens. You are my subordinate, so you know what you should do. After I get rid of Overlord Body Qin, I will sever my own cultivation, and you shall fade into the void. I'll live and solve the ghost ship, and you will still have a chance at survival. Zhe Huali was silent, and he suddenly shook his head. I don't believe in you, I only believe in my knife. He lifted his head and looked at Prince Qiuming. I walk my own path, I cultivate by myself, and my life was given to me by my parents, not by the prince. Even though I belong to the spirit elite guards, I'm not a lowly life. I need to hold the life my parents gave me in my own grasp, and I can't hand it over to anyone else. Prince Qiuming frowned slightly and said, my method is simple, to get rid of all the other unchanging constants. When only I'm left, I will end my own life. Zhe Huali looked at him with an astonished gaze. Prince Qiuming said, when this ship no longer has any unchanging constants, the stability of the divine art will drop to the lowest point, and the divine art will crumble. As long as the divine art crumbles, we will be able to return to our years, and none of us will need to die. Don't worry, I'm confident that I can kill the strong practitioners from the rest of the 35 years. He was rather conceited and said, you have learned from Luo Wushuang and Fu Riluo, and have entered the knife Dao. However, what you learned are all unorthodox methods. Zhe Huali frowned. Prince Qiuming said, I learned the Emperor's throne techniques of the celestial heavens, and we are personally taught by the heavenly teachers in the celestial heavens. Numerous people underestimate the disciples of the royal family and think that we are hedonistic sons, but this is absurd. There are numerous princes, and if we want to stand out among our peers, we need to work harder than anyone else. Otherwise, a prince would just be a featherless phoenix, and that is inferior to a hen dragon. Furthermore, there is internal strife in the royal family, and they have a lot of methods. So the dangers I've met in my life are no less than you. Zhe Huali felt deep veneration, and said solemnly, Prince is tasked with an important task. So you must have slaughtered your way out from tens of thousands of princes. Prince Qiuming smiled and asked, in that case, Zhe Huali, are you going to follow me? No. Zhe Huali said indifferently, even if I admire you, I won't pledge my loyalty to you, and I won't believe you. I only trust my knife. I only pledge my loyalty to my knife. Why do you peasants who rise to power always like to be conceited and contemptuous? Prince Qiuming sighed. I'm most annoyed by people like you, sticking your nose up in the air just because you are a little capable. You think you are so remarkable, but you don't know that I was born into a better family than you, that I'm more hardworking than you, and that my abilities are much higher than yours. However, despite all that, and despite me being here and trying to talk nice to you, you still remain so arrogant and conceited. That's because... Zhe Huali pulled out his knife and rushed at him. He raised the demon knife high up, and knife light filled the sky. The knife chi was like a long rainbow as he roared, when you were born, you had the position and glory, you had the achievements that we might not be able to get even if we struggle for several hundred years. His knife skill was faster and faster. His knife contained his responsibility, his hard work, and his unflinching righteousness. You think it's natural to be born into a royal family, but to us, it's something that's out of reach. You feel that we are arrogant and conceited, but you don't know how many peasants died and how many bones were stepped on to walk to where we are today. You think you are very hardworking, but you don't know the hard work every one of us has put in. We also had to step on the corpses of friends and foes just to reach where we are today. To follow you, to help you become one of the unchanging constants. Zhe Huali's demon knife became frantic, and knife light poured out like mercury to become his brush and ink. It allowed him to write out his emotions to his heart's content. If I give up and follow you, how am I going to face the friends who died beside me? How am I going to answer to those who died under my knife? He laughed loudly and executed his great knife of long Dao. The descendants of Celestial Emperor naturally have a higher starting point the moment they are born. How is that natural? Why can't they die? Prince Qiuming's sword light welcomed his knife, and he said with a smile, I heard that people who enter the knife Dao all have unique heroism. It's a pity I was born noble, and this is something I can't avoid. However, even if I was born a peasant like you, I would also be able to rise up and achieve meteoric success. It's not confidence, it's... His sword light suddenly burst forth, and it was like countless silver needles weaving rapidly. Every silver needle countered every knife light from Zhe Huali precisely, and they blocked all the knife light. There was no sword in Prince Qiuming's hand, and his body suddenly trembled. 49 heavenly Dao appeared behind his back, and he pushed forward. A terrifying divine art burst forth, an overwhelming power pushed towards Zhe Huali's demon knife. The palace halls in the camp broke down into pieces, and crumbled under the power of his divine art. Zhe Huali grunted and coughed up blood. He executed the second form of his demon knife to slash apart the heavenly Dao. Kai, Kai, Kai. Silver needles pierced through the front of his chest and came out from his back, splattering blood in all directions. Prince Qiuming's body shook, and the apparition of a devil god with a bull's horns, a tiger's face, a human body, and a bull's tail appeared and struck out with a punch. Rolling Yudu devil chi transformed into a divine art of the devil path, and a huge fist with countless silver needles smashed into Zhe Huali's body. It overwhelmed Zhe Huali and smashed him into the palace hall that was in front of Qin Mu. Half of the palace hall was crushed by his punch. Prince Qiuming pulled back his hand and walked over with his hands behind his back. His footsteps didn't touch the ground, and he walked 3 feet above the air. He was untainted by dust, and he said indifferently, You have worked hard all your life, comprehended the knife Dao, and finally entered the knife Dao. This is truly laughable. No matter how hard you work, you will never be as high as my starting point. I used 3 moves just now, and they were great divine arts of 3 kinds of Emperor's Throne techniques. Each one of the techniques is a divine technique that you can only dream of getting. Even if you work hard your whole life, it's impossible for you to create such a technique, yet they are easily obtainable for me. Zhe Huali crawled out from the collapsed palace hall, and propped himself up on his demon knife. He gasped for his breath heavily, and blood was foaming at his mouth. His body was swaying, and he seemed like he could collapse at any moment. He wanted to fight, but his injuries were too heavy. He already had no more strength to fight. Prince Qiuming continued to walk over. He looked at the struggling Zhe Huali and revealed a slight smile. A true Emperor's Throne technique can allow you to comprehend Tao in the midst of your cultivation involuntarily, and comprehend divine arts of the path involuntarily. Even if my comprehension wasn't enough, the heavenly teachers of my celestial heavens would take the initiative to create an environment for me to enter the Tao, guiding me into the Tao. He said leisurely, "You guys worked painstakingly and struggle between life and death in order to do so, yet you don't know how laughable it is for so many people like you to die just to enter a mere Tao. You are right, this is natural." He suddenly stopped in his tracks and looked at Qin Mu, who was standing up. The pillar in front of Qin Mu was already shattered from the battle earlier. Without Celestial Venerable Ling's poem in front of him, he had an unpleasant face. So Overlord Body Qin is also like this. Prince Qiuming said with a smile, "You are thriving in the lower bound, and others call you Cult Master and Overlord Body, but in the eyes of the celestial heavens, you are all swine rolling in the mud, shrimps struggling to survive in a small pond." He had a slightly pitiful gaze. To the celestial heavens, the so-called Overlord Body, the so-called saint that appears once every 500 years, and the so-called reform of eternal peace are all just a joke. You are all basically grasshoppers hopping around in an urn that could be squashed to death anytime. Even though my words hurt, this is the truth. Qin Mu opened his palm, and his sword pellet flew out to spin in his palm as he walked forward. Prince Qiuming walked over and said with a smile, "Overlord Body Qin, the reason I came down to the lower bound this time is to crush you grasshoppers. Now is a good time to get rid of you first." On his right hand, Qin Mu's index finger and middle finger came together as he clutched a sword technique. Raising his hand to tap on the heart of his brows, the sword pellet flew out from his sack and floated 3 inches in front of the heart of his brows to spin furiously. Prince Qiuming smiled. Countless silver needles flew to him and collided in his hand to form a treasure sword. Qin Mu's speed became faster and faster until he suddenly stabbed forward. Hum! A brilliant sword pillar stretched over 10 miles. Qin Mu's body shook, and he revealed his 3 heads and 6 arms. The other 2 right hands also raised up in succession to tap on the heart of his brows. Hum hum. The second and third sword pillar arrived one after another. Prince Qiuming roared and also revealed 3 heads and 6 arms. The heart of his brows on all 3 heads split open and revealed his 3rd eyes. His aura was also stronger than before, and his divine arts were even fiercer than before. In an instant, he executed the great divine art from 3 types of Emperor's Throne techniques. The 3 types of divine art were different, and their power burst forth as he took down the 3 opening calamity swords with brute force. Suddenly, countless flying swords paused in the air and began to jump around in strange and unpredictable trajectories in front of his 9 eyes. This caused his divine arts to miss. The second form of calamity sword, raising calamity. Kai kai kai. Sounds of swords piercing through his corporeal body rang out, and Prince Qiuming was covered in flying swords. His eyes revealed a look of astonishment. Xuanju God King's body. He suddenly roared, and light flowed throughout his body. It was another kind of Emperor's Throne technique, and it was a god technique from Zhe widely known for the corporeal body. Light swirled around his corporeal body as flying swords were forced out of his body. Yet, in that instant, he saw Qin Mu's fist coming straight toward his face. Return of Thousand Palms, beyond the strange peaks of heavens smashed ruthlessly on his body, and even Zhe God King's body couldn't withstand the impact. Prince Qiu Ming heard the sound of his bones cracking, and this sound was coming from his chest. The cracking sounds quickly spread to his ribs, and his 24 ribs exploded out the front of his chest, exploding all the way to his backbone. He went flying backwards. He looked forward and saw Qin Mu's body coming to his face. He was currently lifting the golden willow leaf off the heart of his brows. When the willow leaf was opened, Qin Mu's third eye was revealed. Qin Mu's footsteps swirled around him, and every time he took a step, the third eye on one of the heads would shoot a beam of light out into Prince Qiu Ming's third eye. As he took another step, another head shot out another beam. Qin Mu circled around him in 3 steps, and each head shot out a beam to pierce through Prince Qiu Ming's head. Boom! Prince Qiu Ming crashed into the ground and stumbled backwards. He had to retreat dozens of steps before he could stabilize his body. Countless silver needles flew over and formed a sword in his hand again. The tip of the sword pointed diagonally to the ground. You? He looked at Qin Mu, and his 3 heads suddenly exploded. His headless body swayed before collapsing in the dust. How dare you destroy my pillar, and make me unable to read my poem in peace? Qin Mu snorted. And you still have so many things to say. Now I have to wait until the next reset to see the poem on the pillar, and it's all your fault. My grandpa Def hates people like you the most. Bah, I'll beat you to death. Zhe Huali looked at Qin Mu walking over and tried his best to stand up straight. He raised his hand and said, "Cult Master Qin, please." Qin Mu was puzzled. What? Zhe Huali had a serious expression. To be able to die under Cult Master's sword is way better than dying at the hands of Prince Qiu Ming. I have no complaints if I die by your hands. Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and said, "Zhe Huali, you are mistaken." Zhe Huali had a blank look on his face. I'm not here to kill you. In fact, it would be very troublesome for me if you die here. Qin Mu walked up and pulled him out from the debris while explaining. There's a poem on this pillar, and it's the crux to solving the divine art of the ghost ship. If you stand there, you will become one with the pillar after the ghost ship reconstructs itself. If I slash you to death, your blood will smudge the words. Wouldn't that mean I would have to wait for another reset? If you want to die, die further away. Zhe Huali grunted and stared at his hands. He saw Qin Mu holding a bottle of dragon saliva in his hand, and he was currently applying the dragon saliva on his wounds. Cult Master Qin, you are currently treating my injuries, reminded Zhe Huali. Only then did Qin Mu come back to his senses, and throw him onto the ground. He mumbled, healers treat their patients like their parents would. I was just moving out of habit. Zhe Huali's wounds hurt as he got thrown onto the ground, but he realized that all his wounds had already been treated by Qin Mu. His wounds were currently healing, and they were no longer bleeding. You still saved me. He had a complicated feeling in his heart. Cult Master Qin, you should know that we are enemies. You and I were both born peasants, and what we have today was fought for with our bare hands. Therefore, I would definitely have no grudge dying at Cult Master's hands. Let us have a battle of Dao, let me truly be defeated in your hands, let me die in your hands. Qin Mu shook his head and said, Zhe Huali, you are really mistaken. How were you and I born peasants? Compared to Prince Qiu Ming, we can be considered peasants, but if we are compared to ordinary people, we are people who were born with a silver spoon in our mouths. You are the descendant of a god, and have an outstanding aptitude. You have Luo Wushuang teaching you, as well as a devil god such as Fu Riluo teaching you. Which ordinary person could have the conditions you have? Zhe Huali was slightly stunned. Qin Mu said, even though I'm an abandoned baby from the great ruins, I have the 9 elders of disabled elderly village teaching me, 9 outstanding teachers. Furthermore, I'm also the son of Yudu, and the descendant of founding emperor. There's also my background and status, even though they don't help much. In addition, I'm also the overlord body. He shook his head. How can we be considered peasants? The true peasants are those ordinary people, whose parents slog day and night yet still couldn't fill their stomachs. Living in such a family, 3 meals a day is a problem, and trying to survive is also a problem. Some places are covered with tigers and wolves, so the parents might not even live to return at night after searching for food in the morning. The people born here are still trying to work hard in the struggle, trying their best to climb and scale upwards. These people are the peasants. He said calmly, such a person doesn't have our conditions and doesn't have our opportunities and background. They will experience many pits, many traps, and life and death struggles before finally achieving success. We aren't considered heroes among the peasants, they are. Zhe Huali stood up and lowered his head to think. He nodded his head and said, Cult Master Qin is extremely right. Compared to them, we are the ones that look like the disgusting Prince Qiuming. Eternal Peace's reform is trying to change this situation. Qin Mu had a fervent gaze, and he said, the goal of Eternal Peace's reform is to employ everyone's talent to the fullest and make the best use of everything. Everyone can receive sufficient education, with the popularization of primary schools and colleges. By imparting the paths, skills, and divine arts, it allows peasants to encounter fewer bumps in the road during their journey to become a hero, allowing everyone to unleash their potential and talent. He was slightly excited. This reform is so that the gods won't remain high above. Instead, they will have their own professions, working to the best of their abilities. Thinking about it, the future Eternal Peace will have flying ships in the sky with supplies coming to and fro, and it will be extremely sumptuous. Everyone will be able to talk to one another from tens of thousands of miles away. They will be able to reach for the stars and dive into the deep seas to catch turtles, unleashing their talent to their heart's content. They will even be able to build luxurious buildings and communicate with the different heavens, the different worlds. There will be gorgeous art and countless people to contribute their own intelligence to improve the life of the people. Zhe Huali. Zhe Huali stared at him dumbfoundedly, and Qin Mu said fervently, have you heard of the Heavenly Saint cult? Zhe Huali opened his mouth and eyes wide. Let's do it together. Qin Mu grabbed his shoulders and shook him forcefully. Let's carve out a cause together. No matter how much you struggle, how high can you climb in that corrupted celestial heavens? Even if you reach the top, you will merely be like Luo Wushuang, becoming the leader of the spirit elite guards. There will still be countless nobility above you, and you will still have to lower your head when you meet someone like Prince Qiuming. The future of Eternal Peace is different. You can have a higher responsibility, and even more possibilities. Zhe Huali started to feel giddy from his shaking, and he tried to stabilize himself. It was also to stabilize his Tao heart. Cult Master Qin, let me consider it for a moment. Qin Mu let go of him and gripped his fists tightly to cheer him on. He whispered beside his ear, think about your dream. Look into your inner heart and think about what you want to pursue. Zhe Huali's head was muddled. He felt that what Qin Mu said was very good, and it had infected his heart, so he subconsciously nodded. I also feel that the lower bound is much more interesting than the upper bound. However, we are trapped on this ghost ship now, and we probably can't live to get out. So what's the point of talking about this? Qin Mu said with a smile, we can get out. Haven't you noticed? I'm stronger than both you and Prince Qiuming, but I haven't faded yet. Zhe Huali grunted and felt that he had agreed too early. This rascal doesn't know that thing called humility. Celestial Venerable Ling's divine art turned this ship into a ghost ship, and even though the divine art looks powerful, it was still built on the basis of creation divine art. This divine art reverses the substance and causes the substance to remain in an unmoving state, or to even reverse the flow of the substance. However, when she executed her divine art, her divine power wasn't enough, and she didn't truly accomplish this. Light burst forth once more and drowned them. Qin Mu's eyes sparkled, and he was very excited. He walked around in the light as he explained things to Zhe Huali. The substance of the ghost ship is still changing, but when it reaches the limit, the divine art bursts forth from the ghost ship to readjust the substance of the ghost ship, returning it back to the most primitive state. The light faded, and the destroyed palaces returned back to normal. The pillar with the poem had also returned to its original state. Qin Mu still had no signs of fading, and he was even walking around Zhe Huali in excitement. This kind of adjustment brings about a shift in time and space, and only after time traveling 36 times does this divine art finish a full loop. The 36 resets are 36 small cycles. Therefore, after going through 36 small cycles, it would be a big cycle, returning us to the starting point. Do you understand if I simplify it like this? Zhe Huali stared with his eyes wide open. His gaze was blank, and he only came back to his senses after a moment. He hurriedly shook his head. Qin Mu continued to explain. I allowed myself to follow the frequency of a substance similar to the ghost ship, so the divine art from Celestial Venerable Ling would think that I'm part of the ghost ship. That way, I won't fade. Therefore, among those of us who boarded this ship, the ones who can stay will be you and me. Do you understand now? Zhe Huali stared with his eyes wide open again. The demon knife behind him also stared with a blank look. I understand. Zhe Huali's expression returned to normal, and he said firmly, listening to one sentence from you surpasses studying for 10 years. Cult Master Qin's wisdom is truly supreme, impressive. Qin Mu was very gratified. The demon knife behind Zhe Huali's back was still in a daze. It hadn't come back to its senses. If I say I don't understand, isn't he going to underestimate me again? Zhe Huali thought to himself, facing these maniacs in research, I have to act like I know even if I don't. Anyway, the fact that I have shallow knowledge won't be revealed as long as I don't interrupt. And there's one excellent chance to leave this ship. Qin Mu became more and more excited. And that's when the change in substance is at its most violent. Which is the most violent period? That would be the first time the ghost ship time travels. At that time, all of the feathered forest guards on the ship faded into the void, and the ghost ship also faded into the void. If my guess is correct, I'm afraid that Black Tortoise, Vermilion Bird, Green Dragon, and White Tiger, these 4 ancient great deities, also boarded the ship at that time, leaving behind their seals. Zhe Huali rubbed his palms and praised, Brother Qin is truly outstanding. The demon knife behind his back was still in a daze. Qin Mu said in delight, Senior Brother Zhe Huali is truly the one who understands me, you got it immediately. When the 4 deities came to investigate the feathered forest guards traveling through time, they boarded this ship and invoked the huge change in the substance of this ship. The feathered forest guards faded into the void completely and fell into a state where they couldn't be observed. The divine art of Celestial Venerable Ling completely burst forth and clashed with the 4 deities. At that point in time, we will borrow the power of the 4 deities to solve Celestial Venerable Ling's divine art. As long as it's solved, we will be able to rescue those people who faded into the void and return back to our own time. Zhe Huali only understood the last sentence, and he asked with a face full of smiles, Cult Master Qin, what should we do? Preserve our lives. Qin Mu's expression was solemn, and he said faintly, "Preserve our lives in this period of time. Am I right, Lin Xiao?" Zhe Huali felt astonished, and he looked around. Suddenly, his gaze fell onto a lantern hanging on the ship mast. The door on the lantern opened up, and a tiny bird-headed human stood inside. Behind him was his bright son. That tiny human rubbed his palms together and praised, as expected of Celestial Venerable Mu, one of the 9 great celestial venerables. "In just a few small cycles, you have thought of the solution. I've tried Prince Qiu Ming's method of killing all of the unchanging constants, but it didn't work. The only way to break free of this ship is probably your method." Qin Mu said with a smile, "Yet, as Celestial Empress' trusted aide, you can't let anyone escape this ship to prevent the secret from getting out." The tiny human sighed. "That is the reason. All of the unchanging constants have to die, they must die." Qin Mu suddenly asked, "In that case, Lin Xiao, do you still remember how many cycles you have been on this ship for?" The tiny human in the lantern was slightly stunned, and he didn't understand what Qin Mu was asking. Qin Mu said with a smile, "Every time this ship goes through a small cycle, there will be a batch of people boarding the ship. This shows that the people on the ship won't truly die. After they die or fade into the void, they will still come back to life after the next big cycle and board the ship again. The substance on this ship is constant, it won't increase, decrease, change, or move. This is Celestial Venerable Ling's divine art. In that case, when you bring Zhu Wuchen on board this ship again, would the you now still exist?" The light in the lantern suddenly became incomparably intense, and the tiny bird-headed human became slightly impatient and uneasy. Qin Mu smiled and said leisurely, "When that time comes, the you now will vanish and become the you who had just come on board. You will bring Zhu Wuchen on board with your comrades and repeat everything you had done." "How many times have you repeated that now?" The tiny human in the lantern smiled. "I remember all of the cycles." "No, you don't." Qin Mu revealed a look of disdain. "If you remember, I would remember how many big cycles I have been through. All of the unchanging constants would. Yet they were killed time and again by you, so you obviously don't remember, and they obviously don't remember either. The only one with some memory is Dragon Count, which is that crazy old dragon that has fused with this ship. However, even his memory isn't complete." The pupils of the tiny human in the lantern contracted, and he suddenly laughed and clucked like a hen. "Yet you are about to die very soon. After 36 cycles, you will be revived and be killed by me once again." The light in the lantern shone brightly as the sun inside swirled. A terrifying wave swept over and shattered where Qin Mu stood into smithereens. The tiny human in the lantern rushed over and saw that Qin Mu and Zhe Huali had vanished. Qin Mu executed his teleportation divine art to teleport away with Zhe Huali. He said quickly, "This guy has severed his cultivation, but he is still as strong as a god. He could take one of village chief's blows and not die. We need to find a safe place to hide until he resets. When that time comes, he won't remember us anymore." Suddenly, a beam of light swept over and vaporized everything it passed by. The tiny human in the lantern chuckled. "Hide. I know this ship like the back of my hand, where can you hide?" Zhe Huali shook his head and said, "Cult Master Qin, if we work together, can you not kill the hen dragon?" Qin Mu was stunned and looked him carefully in the eyes before shaking his head. "If I work together with Xu Xinghua, I can fight a god. However, you aren't Xu Xinghua." Zhe Huali grunted, and his fighting spirit was ignited. "I'm inferior to Xu Xinghua. Don't underestimate me. Work together with Zhe Huali to kill a god." Qin Mu muttered to himself irresolutely. He and Xu Xinghua knew each other very well, and they were both individuals with outstanding intelligence, so they could usually predict what each other was going to do next and follow up accordingly. Even without practicing beforehand, their coordination was impeccable, so they could fight together to get rid of a strong opponent. As for Zhe Huali, Qin Mu wasn't worried about the power of his knife skills and knife Dao. He was only worried about whether Zhe Huali could catch up to his train of thoughts like Xu Xinghua could. If he couldn't, it would be hard for the coordination to be perfect. It was fine if they were facing ordinary gods. However, Lin Xiao had an extremely high realm, and it was he who severed his cultivation to drop his cultivation to the realm of honored god. Even though his realm had fallen, his horizons and knowledge far surpassed any other honored god, therefore, he was able to escape from village chief's sword. Furthermore, the cultivation that he had severed had turned into a small sun inside the lantern, and the sun contained terrifying energy that could burn a huge hole in village chief's sword picture. For the energy in the small sun to not decrease until now, one could imagine how strong Lin Xiao was when he was at his peak. If their coordination was bad, they would definitely be killed by him. Suddenly, Qin Mu executed his teleportation divine art once more, and a beam of light shone over from the back, vaporizing where they had just hidden. That lantern flew over, and the tiny human inside the lantern checked around, but he couldn't find any traces of them. He chuckled and said, "Where can you guys hide? I know the ins and outs of the whole ship. There's nowhere for you to escape to, nowhere for you to hide." The tiny human flew out from the lantern and landed on the ridge of the palace hall. He flapped his wings, and the lantern exploded open. The sun inside rolled out, and he grabbed it under his claws. His body swelled up in the wind, and the sun under his feet was also becoming bigger. His body size soon grew to be 300 yards tall. He had a chicken head, human body, and dragon scales on his neck, while the feathers on his back had various colors. He flapped his wings furiously and raised his head to crow. Crow of the rooster, break of dawn. The small sun under his claw also transformed into a 300 yards big sun, and grew brighter and brighter as he crowed. The golden rays that were 10,000 fathoms long shone like flying swords sweeping out in all directions. Kai kai kai, the palace halls on the ghost ship got pierced by the golden rays from the big sun, and they were covered in holes. The ground got pierced until it looked like a broken sieve. Lin Xiao flapped his wings, and the sun under his feet rolled with his body. The golden light swept down and raised the palaces to the ground. They were then lit up by the intense light and burst into flames. Lin Xiao swept everything in his way and said with a smile, "Celestial Venerable Mu. There's no need to hide, come out quickly." On the other side, light twinkled. Qin Mu and Zhe Huali suddenly appeared in the palace hall where Celestial Emperor's coffin was placed. Lin Xiao will soon find his way here. Qin Mu placed Zhe Huali down and quickly roamed around the hall. "Zhe Huali, how is your sense of space?" Zhe Huali was slightly stunned and didn't understand what he meant. He said honestly, "Even though my knife skills are upright, I need an extremely strong sense of space in order to execute it. You and I have fought before, so you should know my knife light requires precise calculation in every foothold of space. Only then can I ensure my knife skills are completely perfect when I execute them." Qin Mu nodded his head, and he suddenly stopped. He stomped the ground forcefully. Zhe Huali looked at him and saw vital qi flowing out under his feet. The vital qi transformed into rune markings, and was imprinted on the ground as he moved. These runes were very complicated, and there was too much logic involved. Zhe Huali didn't really understand. Qin Mu moved to the front, back, left, and right, walking over and over again in an area of 20 yards. Suddenly, there was a loud catcher, and a tunnel appeared in the ground, which led to the hold of the ship. Zhe Huali was stunned. Qin Mu had already walked into the tunnel, and he waved at him. He hurriedly followed after him and said with a soft voice, "Cult Master Qin, how did you know there was a gate here?" This ship should have been designed by my big senior brother, and the layout is quite similar to the flying ship of my heavenly saint cult. According to the layout of my house, the tunnel leading to the hold of the ship should have been right here, so I tested it. Qin Mu said with a smile, I have forged flying ships for Eternal Peace Empire before, so I'm very clear about the layout of the ship. Zhe Huali was silent, and he suddenly asked, Cult Master Qin, what haven't you done before? They arrived inside the hold of the ship, and were stunned by the majestic sight in front of them. He saw huge dragon bones lined from the south to the north, passing through the inside of the body. Even though the huge dragon was only left with its bones, they were still glowing a brilliant gold, and they lit up the entire inside of the ship. Other than dragon bones, there were also ribs of a Qin inside, and the thick rib bones of the Qin were arranged on top of the dragon bones. There were all kinds of strange beast runes appearing on the Qin bones, and when these runes lit up, they looked very eye-catching in the golden light of the dragon bones. And the roof, which should be below the deck, was lined with phoenix feathers of various colors. They were like rainbow clouds in the sky. Great ship! Both of them praised in unison. Qin Mu stopped in his footsteps, and took out his sword pellet to examine the surroundings. I have never made a child before. Imperial Preceptor showed me a book on how to make a child, and the man and woman inside was so shameful. He tilted his head and blushed when he thought of the man and woman in the book. Zhe Huali and the demon knife opened their eyes wide and gave off an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Qin Mu's finger flicked gently, and a silver line flew out to measure the internal space of the ghost ship. He measured the length and circumference of the dragon bones and Qin bones, and soon, he got all the data he needed. There was light shining from outside the tunnel as Lin Xiao controlled the big sun to fly above this palace hall. The sword light of the sun destroyed the palace hall recklessly. In just a while more, the hall was going to collapse, and the tunnel would be revealed. Qin Mu grabbed the sword pellet in his hands and closed his eyes. After a moment, he suddenly opened his eyes and gripped tightly. The sword pellet transformed into a treasure sword. He stepped on the air and rose up, sprinting inside the body of the ship with his sword in hand. He was graceful, and his sword was like a swimming dragon, as he executed all kinds of sword moves. He was like a heroic scholar with his sword as his brush, splashing ink on the dragon bones and Qin bones. With the body of the ship as paper, he scattered writings and set his feelings free. Soon, he flew to the sky, and his body was moving parallel to the domed roof. His sword was fast as he imprinted runes between the gaps of the rainbow feathers. Whoosh! Qin Mu landed from mid-air. When his body was 10 yards away from the ground, his wrist trembled as he swung his sword to right on the ground. Sounds of swords slashing rang out non-stop. The internal space of the ghost ship was extremely vast, and it stretched for 300 yards. Qin Mu stuck close to the ground, and his sword lights rained down. Soon, he moved from south to north and wrote down a series of runes. His figure suddenly stopped, and he hung in mid-air. Zhe Huali looked around and saw all kinds of runes marked clearly on the dragon bones from the south to the north. On the domed roof were also pictures constructed by runes that moved from the south to the north. There were also 2 bones that were imprinted with runes by him. However, the body of the ship was simply too huge. Qin Mu could only imprint a small section with runes, so there were still many places that weren't imprinted. Cult Master Qin, what's the purpose of doing this? Zhe Huali was puzzled. Qin Mu's chest heaved up and down violently. It was evident that he was extremely exhausted. The treasure sword in his hand suddenly shrunk into a sword pellet. The sword pellet suddenly burst forth. Countless sword lights filled the space inside the ship, and the sword light traveled back and forth. The runes that Qin Mu had imprinted lit up and dazzled their eyes. It was as if the flying swords had activated the power inside the runes. The light from countless runes shone onto the sword lights that were flying and got reflected by the flying swords. In the sky, the land, and the walls on the left and right, more and more runes appeared. The runes were also becoming more and more complicated. Zhe Huali was dumbfounded. All of the sword lights suddenly vanished and transformed into a furiously spinning sword pellet that stopped in front of the heart of Qin Mu's brows. Meanwhile, inside the ship, countless runes were still dancing in the sky. Qin Mu's clutched sword fingers on both his left and right hands. His index finger and middle finger were put together, while his thumb was pressed down on his ring finger and pinky finger. The sword fingers on his right hand were vertical in front of the heart of his brows. The sword fingers on his left hand were tilted up and lifted the wrist of his right hand. Both hands slowly sank downwards. At the same time, apparitions of arms appeared from the back of his body, and it was as if he had grown 1,000 arms that were all clutching different sword techniques. They slowly assembled and fused with his 2 arms in succession. In the end, the apparitions of the 1,000 arms vanished. Stop! Qin Mu gave a low shout, and in the huge space inside the ship, the scuttling runes nailed into the sky, land, and 4 halls in succession. These runes gradually darkened, and 72 pictures appeared, each of them being different from the rest. Qin Mu gasped for breath as he landed from the sky. He half knelt on the ground, and his vital qi was severely exhausted. Cult Master Qin, you have broken down your sword Dao and struck it into the space inside the ship. Zhe Huali looked at the 72 murals that were gradually fading away, and said solemnly, "That's not right. It's not only the divine art of sword Dao, there's also the divine art of martial Dao, the divine art of formation skills, the divine art of knife skills. There's also the divine art of magnetism. I've seen the divine art of magnetism over at Mother Earth's place. You even used the divine art of painting Dao to transform into 72 paintings, which are a total of 72 divine arts. The 72 divine arts formed a chain of killing formations. Your learnings are so mixed." Qin Mu nodded his head. He executed the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, and tried his best to recover his vital qi. His voice was slightly hoarse now. "Now that the formation is laid out and my vital qi is exhausted, I can only rely on you. Zhe Huali, do you have the confidence to fuse into my 72 murals and sever the head of that hen dragon?" Zhe Huali took in a deep breath and said calmly, "The battle of killing a god, to slay Lin Xiao, Cult Master Qin, has already completed 90%. All that's left is for me to sever his head with my knife. If I can't take his head, how would I have the face to compete with Xu Xinghua? To even compete with you?" Qin Mu revealed a smile. Right at this moment, loud explosions rang out continuously from the tunnel, and Lin Xiao's voice traveled into their ears. He said with a smile, "I've been on this ship for so long, and I still haven't found a tunnel to enter inside the ship. Never would I expect Celestial Venerable Mu to find it." "Celestial Venerable Mu, how impressive. Truth be told, when I heard you tell that sword god that you were Celestial Venerable Mu, I was also stunned. I would never have expected to actually catch a big fish here." He was ineffably excited. Intense light traveled over as Lin Xiao flapped his wings to fly. The rolling sun under his feet burst into the ship with a whoosh, and the scorching light transformed into beams of sword light to shoot out in all directions. Suddenly, the sword light paused in the sky, and the golden swords formed by the rays actually remained still in the air. Lin Xiao spread his wings and slowly landed on the big sun. His claws gripped tightly onto the big sun, and he looked excitedly at both of them. Hum hum hum. The big sun vibrated, and even more golden swords appeared in front to lock onto Qin Mu and Zhe Huali. "Celestial Emperor and the gods bestowed you, Hao, Ling, Yu, Hua, Yu, Yun, Mu, and Qin, the 9 celestial venerables that all had extraordinary attainments. Lin Xiao stared at Qin Mu and ignored Zhe Huali. The reputation of the 9 Celestial Venerables is simply too big. Celestial Venerable Hao is already Celestial Emperor Hao, and he controls the Heaven-Han Celestial Heavens, while the other few Celestial Venerables are also extraordinary. Only Celestial Venerable Mu and Celestial Venerable Qin's whereabouts are always unknown. Both of you will appear once in a while, but I would never expect to actually find Celestial Venerable Mu, who had come from the future generation, on this ship. Cluck cluck cluck. Zhe Huali had a blank look on his face. Qin Mu said indifferently, I don't know what you are proud of. Lin Xiao, do you know that you are merely a dish in the future? Bullshit. The dragon scales on Lin Xiao's neck flared up, and feathers popped out under the scales. His corporeal body quickly swelled up, and he chuckled. Hen dragons are the descendants of golden hen and divine dragons. We control the course of the sun, and our bloodline is noble and high above. You humans are the dishes on the table. Attack! Qin Mu shouted, and the entire inside of the ship became incomparably bright. The power of 72 pictures burst forth in that instant. One of the formations was a magnetism divine art. So in that instant, Lin Xiao's corporeal body became incomparably heavy, as though Mount Meru after Mount Meru was pressing down on him. He and his big son crashed into the ground from the pressure. The rest of the formations burst forth, and all kinds of terrifying great divine arts bombarded the suppressed Lin Xiao from all directions. The space inside the ship was nearly torn apart by these abnormally powerful divine arts, and after those divine arts flew past, space would be warped. Space overlapped into countless shapes and made it hard for people to walk. Zhe Huali pulled out his demon knife and roused his cultivation. With his knife entering the Tao, he reached his peak in an instant. At this moment, the light of a formation shone down on his body, and that was a teleportation formation. Zhe Huali seemed to get teleported into a world inside a painting, and then, that painting moved up and down in the space that was trembling violently. Now he understood why Qin Mu had asked him how his sense of space was. At this moment, he had completely lost his sense of direction from the torment of the teleportation divine art. Zhe Huali resisted the urge to vomit. He executed his demon knife furiously, while raising his cultivation furiously as well. Swoosh! His figure appeared beside the bird-headed god that was covered in injuries, and Zhe Huali roared angrily. Taking a step forward, he raised his knife and poured out all of his power from the knife. There was still a glint of astonishment in Lin Xiao's eyes. Next, his head flew up as his god blood poured out. Part 323 and 324 end here. Thank you for watching.